The world's best physios don't just treat, they coach. Welcome to the Physio Coach Podcast. This episode is sponsored by Jane app. Jane is a practice management platform that helps clinicians like you and I spend less time on admin and more time caring for people. From online booking and scheduling to notes, reminders and billing, Jane is designed to reduce the day-to-day load on busy clinicians like us. After a few years of running Better Physio Group, we wanted to level up our practice management system. 10 minutes into the demo call and I was convinced. Use code PhysioCoach2MO, that's PhysioCoach2MO, to get 2 months free. Sign up to the demo and see it for yourself. This podcast is a product of Better Physio Group, provider of physio and PT services in central London, helping people in pain, suffering with injury to feel better and live better. There's physio and then there's better physio. Why is it done that way? And can it be done better? So this is a quote that I picked up from a podcast that I listened to on the way in this morning. Thanks for coming in today to the podcast, Rob Beaven. Chiropractor, the physio community's favourite chiropractor, I would say. Is that fair to say? But that quote really sat with me as I was listening, because it's almost the answer to our final question: what does better never ends mean to you? So there's a little reminder to have that fresh in your mind, and you can't use this one now, but that answer really does resonate with me. Well, that question, really, that double question: why is it done that way? Can it be done better? That drives me on as a clinician, drives me on as a human, really. That question constantly in my mind. Is that still the way that you're living your life now? Because that was a podcast that I listened to that you said was your first ever podcast appearance. I think you said 2017. Found it on the archives of YouTube. So Rob, tell me, is that still what drives you on to this day?
100%. I can't take credit for that quote. I don't know who it came from. I remember taking over a job that had nothing to do with MSK or chiropractic, and stuck on the wall was that quote. And I remember thinking, well, that's a really good approach to life, really, because so many jobs, so many decisions we make are just because someone told us to, and that's just the way it's always been done. And there's another quote that's similar, because it's the way it's always been done is the most dangerous quote in the English language, because it doesn't get rid of that innovation, or it gets rid of that innovation, sorry. So I think, that has always been my approach to MSK. That's always been my approach to being a chiropractor. And then that's been my approach to business as well. So why do we do certain things in the business? Does it have to be that way? Why? And then having those discussions with business partners and other colleagues helps us be innovative within MSK. So no, I fully adhere to that as a philosophy, if you will, and I still use it, I would say, every day. Because you're a chiropractor that blends with all sorts of different forms of MSK practice, and I know that about you already, and that quote really encapsulates why that's happened, is because you kept asking that question, and when you were younger, and you were thinking about what I want to do with my life, and I know that you played rugby, interested in the medical world, just happenstance just ended up with you in the chiropractic field. Tell us a bit more about that journey then. So from that point where you're on that course and you're thinking about helping people, what then shapes you towards the practitioner that you are now? If I dial back a little bit before the course and think about why I went into it in the first place, it probably gives you more of an insight. So when I grew up in Bath, and I wanted to be the Bath rugby physio. That was my goal. I loved Bath rugby. I loved playing rugby, and thought, that's a cool job, right? And then at that time, probably when you were applying with similar ages, there was my mum's best friend happened to be a physiotherapist in Bath, and I was talking to her about it. And she said, it's a real struggle at the moment to graduate as a physio. And people are coming out as physiotherapists, and they're working in all sorts of jobs because they can't get placements at the moment. She said, you might be worthwhile looking at something else. And then she was very much, it sounds bad saying pro chiropractic, because it sounds like there should be an anti, but generally she was very much like, have you looked at some of the other options, chiropractic, osteopathy, because you won't be out of work, I think were her terms. And I went, okay. So I went to observe a local chiropractor in Bath, and he happened to, on the day, treat a couple of members of the Bath rugby team. And I kind of went, he kind of does what I thought physios do.
I'd never seen a chiropractor personally. I didn't really know what they did. So from my outside looking in, went, oh, that looks kind of what I thought physio would be. That looks fine. I went to observe the chiropractic university and thought, oh, it's on the beach. That was my way in. And so I didn't really understand the kind of the background, the philosophical approaches, all of that with chiropractic. I just looked at, oh, they can help people with their sore knees, sore backs, sore necks, whatever it might be. And if there's a way in to work with Bath Rugby, brilliant. And that was kind of the approach that I had. And then through the course, it kind of opened up the mindset and the different approaches that I'd come across I'd never heard of before. And, you know, the old subluxation models and all of that, that was a brand new word to me. I'd never come across that. And then I very much stuck within that MSK lane. And then graduating, I just looked for things that interested me. Am I interested in ankles? Am I interested in knees? I don't care whether that person was a chiro, a physio, a sports therapist, an EP. It didn't matter to me. I was like, oh, cool, that's going to help me get better at managing that patient's ankle tomorrow. And I think that was quite unique at the time, because many people chased certifications, and they chased kind of certificates in chiropractic specifically, and they went for all these post-nominals and doing all of that, which again, I'm not frowning upon, but it's all very much, oh, that's not going to help you be a better chiropractor. So I was kind of frowned upon a little bit for what I did, but I think it opened me up to a different world. And going to places like Pure Sports Med and their evening lectures, and I remember seeing like Ben Cormack, I think, went on one of his first ever courses, and it opened me up to different people, different mindsets, and I think that kind of shaped my early couple of years within the MSK world.
All guided by curiosity to help the person, rather than to add letters on for this credibility that perhaps you didn't sense that you needed at that time, which has shaped where you are now, as you say. What I want to go back to, which, and the regular listeners will know that my experience or my journey into physio was very similar to yours into chiro, because I was also put off physio by a well-meaning careers advisor who said that it's really hard to get onto the physio course, you know, and you need good grades. And my predicted grades were pretty good anyway, so I thought, wow, they must need really good grades. And it just, for someone who wasn't particularly confident at that point, I just thought, well, I'll find something a little more straightforward then. So sports science then made sense for me. So my journey was sports science into physio as an MSc afterwards. I think what it really shows is how impressionable youngsters really can be, just through very simple and well-meaning advice we've taken on a path that has worked for us. Don't get me wrong, but for someone else perhaps that might end up pushing them off course.
Yeah.
I think we just need to be careful when we're advising youngsters about what we're saying, how we're saying it, why we're saying it, and actually asking them questions about what it is they really want to do, rather than telling them these real specifics that are not necessarily based in any fact, because right, we've both done fine and ended up doing well.
And you'll put your biases on the advice that you give to someone. So whatever you believe in or approach, you know, if you are coming from a standpoint of, I don't like any chiropractors, and a youth comes to you observing your clinic, doing some work experience, and they say, oh, I'm also considering being a chiropractor, you're going to obviously put your bias on that, you know, in the same way that I would, same way that anyone else would. Even as, you know, you go to observe a lawyer and they're going to have a bias about chiro versus physio probably as well. It's going to be stemmed from personal experience more likely, or just societal expectations, but you're going to put your bias on it. So I think you really have to consider the outcome for, like, what do you want to do? There's going to be many paths into that result, and I think that our journeys kind of prove that point.
And when you've realised that what you want to do is to help people, and it just so happens that you're a chiropractor, it sounds like that's opened you up to a very different way of practicing to a traditional chiropractor. Do you find that you get much stick for that? Do you get much, certainly in the chiropractic community, is that frowned upon? You mentioned that earlier, right?
Probably. Yeah. I would, if I can ask you a question, and I'll say, when you say traditional chiropractor, what would be your understanding of that? Because that...
Yeah, the shortened treatment model, the repeat treatments within a week, the reliance on X-rays to guide diagnostics, there being a very business-focused way of running your career, and some of this is broad brushstroke, stereotypical stuff that I've heard of, and we've also had an episode a few years back with Jonathan Cairns, who I think is a fantastic chiropractor, who also helped to dispel some of the myths. So I'm talking brushstrokes about previous experiences and knowledge, but I also know that there is another side to that for people like yourself and Jonathan who show a more broad way of practicing MSK. So yeah, both ways of answering that question.
No, I fully agree. And the reason I just clarified that was because, a lot of people, when they're thinking about traditional chiropractor, what does that mean to them? And I think that it's good to understand people's thoughts on that. What's interesting about that is when I went into the profession, I'd never heard of that type of model. And when I was at university, that wasn't the taught model. It wasn't discussed. It was very much the forefront of kind of, I would put MSK at the time. And graduating, I had lots of friends who graduated as physios. And even then we were kind of on the same plane. And the business model and all of that, I was more exposed to that once I graduated, actually. And then seeing how other people, my colleagues, going into various practices and seeing that. So I've always been very different to that. I've always been very much around doing my own thing. Everyone will say this, right? But put the interests of the person or the patient in front of you first. But whatever your philosophical standpoint, you'll always justify the means if you're saying you put the patient in front of you first. So I've always been that way inclined. Maybe I do get some stick from it. I don't get a lot of, not that I notice, so I don't get hate mail or anything like that. But I would say I am quite different to how a lot of people will treat. I'll have students come to observe me, and I'll often say that to them. I'll say I'll have 10 people today, and some people I won't touch. Some people I will only do manual therapy on. Some people it will purely be a gym-based session. Some people we might talk for half an hour. And you're going to see, and that's the feedback I get a lot from people observing me, is that you've had such a wide range of people in a 6-hour shift. And that's what I enjoy, and that's what I find interesting. And sometimes I will go to maybe what you might call a more traditional manual therapist, and then sometimes I might look more like an S&C coach. Sometimes I might be doing an EPLI, and it will really differ. And that's what keeps it interesting to me. And I think we've spoken about this before, that specialist generalist.
Yeah.
So that's what I consider to be myself as a traditional chiropractor at the moment. That's what I do, and that's the way I hope it moves forward as well.
Yeah, and it comes back to the original quote, why is it done that way? You were questioning the traditional methods and just trying to figure out how can it be done better? Yeah. What can I do in order to help the person in front of me get better? And you were learning from all different places, the non-traditional learning methods perhaps of a chiropractor going into these physio courses and figuring out there's other ways of doing this. And here you are telling me what you do, and I'm thinking that's exactly what I do.
Which is good, right?
I don't consider myself a manual therapist, but I do use manual therapy. I don't consider myself an S&C coach, but I do get people in the gym training with S&C principles. I don't consider myself a therapist, but some sessions all we do is talk, because I'm trying to take the best ways of helping people and figuring out for the person in front of me what I need to use.
Exactly.
And that way, that kind of expert generalist that you've just referenced there, that way of practice takes many, many years to refine and to become an expert generalist. Because, so I took this from a book, Range, which I think is Brian Epstein who wrote it. It's a brilliant way of helping me feel heard as a person, actually, in the way that I live my life, that I don't have to be a super specialist. And there's space for that. Plenty of people out there who are super specialists. But for me, I love to learn broadly. I love to learn about all sorts of things: history, philosophy, psychology, fitness, health, nutrition, sleep, and sometimes physio.
Yeah.
And I can do a few manipulations as well. So I could do some of the more traditional chiropractic type treatments for the right person, for the right situation in front of me. But in order to become an expert generalist, you need to get a reasonable grounding in all of those bits, all those pillars that we've just mentioned there. That takes years.
Oh, of course it does. Yeah.
You're faking it till you make it for a long time before you can do that. And as a result, you almost need to be comfortable with not figuring things out all the time, or should I say uncomfortable with not figuring things out, and then having that thirst for knowledge.
Yeah, and it's okay not to know.
Yeah.
It's not okay not to know twice. Yeah. And I say this to students it's developing a really wide knowledge base around MSK and all of the surrounding things that surround MSK. It's not just a straight line. There are lots of things that play a role in that. And then you can then go deeper on certain areas. So you should have enough overview within a full body MSK to recognize stuff that comes in and go, this is either within my scope or this is, outside of my scope. But then recognize when this is not outside of my scope, when this is outside of my scope, then say, okay, I can refer this on to that specialist, to know when that knee needs to go off and see an orthopod. That's what takes quite a long time. And knowing when that person needs a scan and doesn't need a scan, and having that conversation with the patient, that takes years to understand that knowledge, and it only comes from watching, learning, observing, spending time in other people's clinics, sitting in a knee surgeon's clinic to look at when are they looking at operating on this knee and when are they saying, no, this is much more of a conservative management. That takes years to get that framework.
I was just walking you around this facility before we started, and we both walked into the Pilates studio, and you pointed at the reformer and you're like, I still don't know how to use one of those. Yeah. And I said, yeah, me neither. And that's because I know where anyone who is more interested in Pilates than they are in the gym, I know exactly the physio that they're going to go and see, and it isn't me. So even within the physio side of things, I'm not going to hang on to someone who just isn't my type of patient. I'm not going to be able to help them as well as the Pilates specialist physios within my team can. And you said the same. So it doesn't even have to be outside of our profession. It's within our profession. Who's best suited to treat this person and help this person.
Yeah, and it's important to recognise that. That one thing where chiropractors will not do anything of is post-operative rehab. Maybe later stage, but that early 2, 4, 6 weeks post knee replacement, ACL, like that's outside of my wheelhouse. So when I have a patient who comes to see me tomorrow, and for whatever reason they're having a particular surgery, I will then refer them on to that. Go see one of my other physios. They've got loads more experience with this. Come back and see me further down the line, and then we can re-engage. But we're very much an MDT, and it's looking at people's strengths. We've got that pelvic health team. We've got people that have worked in respiratory, and recognizing that, and not just having a go at certain things, which ultimately can be quite detrimental to the patient in front of you. If you're having a go at cardiac rehab, is not really something to mess around with.
I'd never thought that before, that the exposure to orthopedics in placements and as part of our development at university would have geared us up better to deal with that post-op. Is that your take on it? Is that part of the broadness of the physio training actually helps with that early stage post-op?
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think it's something which is not learnable, but it's more, do I want to, when I've got people who are much more comfortable dealing with that? And I could sit and observe on one of those sessions, and I have done, and I probably know enough that I can handle that, but do I want to when I haven't been exposed to that wide range of stuff? So that's why I'd much rather pass that on where I can, to recognise my limitations and my strengths and my weaknesses.
You've also touched on something else that I hadn't fully grasped either. Firstly, I heard it in the research I was doing on the way in this morning, that the chiro course is 5 years, which I didn't know that. I hadn't realised 5 years. It's also almost entirely MSK, which is very different to the physio learning. So we were saying about the differences and the similarities, but perhaps we could even argue here that chiros have a head start. Firstly, it's 5 years, not 3 or 2 on the MSc. Secondly, it's virtually entirely MSK.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, entirely MSK. Bit of vestibular, so kind of BPPV pattern recognition, Epley, a little bit in that, a little bit around headaches, a little bit more around gen med, but yeah, majority of it. But all of that is with an MSK hat on. But it's all MSK. There's no respiratory. There's very limited neuro. There's very little post-op stuff. So it is all totally framed within MSK. It's the course I did was 5 years, 4 years with a year clinical placement. The course now is 4 years. So they've changed it. And you can there's some speedier entry routes as well. If you are coming in as a physio or an EP or something like that, there's some faster options as well. But yeah, it is fully grounded in MSK. And that's the bit that's often not really spoken about. There's a large bias on manual therapy. And that it means that when people come out, they are very well grounded in management of, particularly back and neck pain, but MSK conditions. And I think it probably does give them a head start from day one. They're trained, chiropractors are trained to work autonomously from day one. They're not trained in that NHS environment where they have that supervision type model and that framework to follow through. You graduate as a chiropractor, and then by day one, you could open up a clinic and start seeing patients. So you have to be prepared for that. Very few people do that for obvious reasons, but hopefully people are trained well enough that they can do that.
And when it comes to day one, you've qualified, you've got someone coming in. How do you feel then? Let's say you've got a back pain coming in, right? The person saying, I've got back pain,
can you help me? What's the first thing on your mind as to how you're going to help that person in front of you in those early years of your practice?
As a chiropractor or me personally?
Well, both, actually, because I think that's the interesting thing about this conversation.
I think when I graduated, I would have seen myself a failure. And I think most people when they graduated, if they didn't try to manipulate a patient. And I think that's kind of where it will often stem to is, unfortunately, you'll see manual therapy is almost kind of put in a hierarchy where you have kind of, if I label it soft tissue work, building up to MOBs and manips in that type of hierarchy. And we still have these discussions now where things are seen in this hierarchical structure of, I'll start with this and then I'll build to this, as opposed to putting manual therapy into one box with lots of different options. I don't agree with this kind of hierarchical structure of manipulation's better than MOBs, which is better than soft tissue work. Maybe it is for some patients, but maybe it's the other way around for other patients. And I just put that into one pillar of manual therapy. And it says this, can we do some manual therapy with the patient? Yes, we can. Where that differs is when I graduated, I would have very much listened to that hierarchy. And I would have seen myself as, well, I didn't manipulate that person. Would they have got better if I'd done that? Because they're probably maybe they would have got better quicker if I'd done that, but maybe I was a bit scared to, or I thought I was going to hurt them. And because I didn't work in a traditional chiropractic clinic, and I wasn't being directly supervised constantly by other chiropractors, I probably wasn't pushed in that direction. But then I think that did me a favor, because I would see an acute neck come in, and I would have in my head stories of tutors saying, oh yeah, quick adjustment, manipulation to the upper cervical spine, and they walk out going, oh, magic, brilliant, I'm good now. And maybe I was a bit scared of doing that. I was a bit nervous. Had Roger Carey in my head talking about, VBAI and CAD and things like that. I was probably a bit overcautious sometimes. But then patients still got better. And I was in this real dichotomy early doors, and I probably went too far in the opposite direction and really disliked chiropractors and disliked manual therapy and was quite anti it. And it's taken me quite a long time to come back again. But I really wrestled with that for quite a long time of, is chiropractic a technique? And if I'm not doing that technique, does that make me not a chiropractor? And that kind of circle. And now I'm very comfortable with what I do and happy to call myself a chiropractor. But early doors, when you're graduating, you're really wrestling with that identity of what a chiropractor is. And if we define that by its treatment techniques, then that's quite weird. Because then what if you're not if you subscribe to that model, you're not manipulating, does that mean you're not a chiropractor? And a lot of people can't really answer that question. And they'll try and talk about, well, we can do something to the spine with a philosophical lens or philosophical hat on. And it never really worked for me, to be honest.
It drew me back to my first couple of years as a physio, where I was left to my own devices, actually. And I think on the whole, I was the right kind of person to be allowed to do that, because I was a thinker, and I would then go and figure stuff out. You mentioned earlier, you could get something wrong, but don't get it wrong twice. That's what someone says, a condition I've never heard of, right, quickly look it up.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And you're kind of figuring it all out. And yeah, I really had the space to find my identity, actually, as a physio. I was in an occupational health clinic in a factory in Dagenham, and it was smelly, it was stinky, the dirty. It was a bit of a weird place. And when the factory workers are coming in with back pain, neck pain, our manual therapy teaching was, mobilize it, dig in there, release that, soft tissue, release it. Yeah. And they would love it. The patients would walk away, God, I feel amazing. Yeah. But they come back the next week and they're the same. So you do the same again.
Yeah.
And then they come back the next week and it's the same. Yeah. And because they had this unlimited access, they would essentially just come back as much as they wanted to. But in the end, they stopped because they realised that nothing's really changing.
Yeah.
And I would then get annoyed. Why are they not getting better? Why? Yeah. Hang on,
I've released that.
I've released it. I keep pushing it, and I keep getting all the things right. I'm doing everything everyone's telling me to do, but why aren't they getting better?
Yeah.
And towards the end of my time there, probably about 3 years into my career, I started to work out that there was more going on. There was the psychological components. There was the social components of their job. They didn't enjoy what they were doing. They were going through some kind of... They had this restrictions process, where if you had an injury, you would be restricted from doing certain types of jobs. Yeah. So then they would almost come in and you start... there was a cynical part to my thoughts at that time. Oh, they're coming in because they want to get off that job. Obviously, consciously, they're not thinking that, really. That now I understand that. They're unhappy, they're in pain, they're suffering in one way or another, and they
label the job as part of that unhappiness and suffering. And obviously the option for them is to try not to be on that job. But at the time I was just figuring out what was going on, and psychology started to be a factor. So that for me was the starting point of me really getting the biopsychosocial model. Not just understanding it as a thing, but getting it as a concept that I could use in my practice. I don't think I was doing anything with it, but it was just the questions in my mind were starting to be asked about that.
I remember struggling with that. I remember listening to Peter O'Sullivan pretty early on in my career, and him talking about cutting the disc bulge off spinal models, and how, people saying you go on a Peter O'Sullivan course and you remove that little red bulge from the spine model that everyone's got. I remember thinking, but how does he explain? I don't understand how he explains it. And I came from that very kind of reductionist, biomechanical mindset for that framework, and other things were just simply an add-on of just, maybe I can ask them about if they're sleeping well. But that was very much an add-on. It wasn't, I probably call myself a biopsychosocial practitioner, but I was still very much nested in the bio. And I almost then reduced that down to 3 succinct phases, 90% based in the bio, and I would just maybe touch on a few other little bits. The difference I had early on in my career was that I had an NHS placement. So the clinic I worked in, there was a scheme at the time called the any AQP, any qualified practitioner scheme, and you'd see a GP for an MSK issue, and he would give you a list of local clinics that were working in this, chiro, physio and osteo, and you basically chose one that was local to you. And so I saw patients quite early on in an NHS model, which I would never have seen in a private practice model. And I saw, whether they were people suffering with addiction. And I remember thinking, is heroin a contraindication to doing manual therapy? Like I at the time thinking that wasn't taught at university. So I remember it really opened up my eyes to a few different stuff, a few different models and a few different frameworks. I really had to consider the psycho and the social aspect of that when I'm dealing with what were quite complex patients for my first year of practice.
You mentioned about asking these questions and not knowing what to do with the answers. I would say I was doing that for many, many years. And although I was aware that there were other things going on, I still didn't really know what to do with them. I remember having conversations about chronic pain with people a few years in, and definitely it didn't land. Like it landed so poorly. But it's the reflection that comes off the back of that. I didn't like the fact that it didn't land well. So I had to then figure it out. I had to work out what to do with it. So I kept asking the questions. I kept trying to understand this stuff from a different lens, even though I didn't, and I was still primarily bio, big bio, small psychosocial. I was starting to ask questions that were at least giving me insights. And it's probably only the last 5 to 8 years, the second half of my career, I suppose, where I've been able to shape conversations more holistically in a way that does help the person see it from the biopsychosocial model. And that, but you have to get stuff wrong. You can't really get through those 10,000 hours. You can't fast track that really. You have to just keep asking those questions.
You only get better at those conversations by having those conversations. And I dread to think what it was like for me, or for my patients 8-10 years ago, trying to delve a little bit into the world of pain science and, stumbling around that. And patients must have left thinking, God, what was he on about? I just wanted someone to crack my neck and get me out of the way. And I've had patients come to me now, and, I know there's a very well-meaning clinician not far away from me who dabbles around this quite a lot. And I had a patient fairly recently. He came to sit down and he said, God, there's some wackos in your profession. And I was thinking he was going to go down this, someone tried to sell me a treatment plan of £4,000 and yada yada. And he went, I sat down and told him about my 15 years of back pain, and he just wanted to talk to me. And it was really interesting. It flipped the model on his head, because this guy's a very busy person, a very busy person who works in financial services. He sees a chiropractor every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 5 minutes, crack, out he goes. He loves it. He's happy with that. He'd rather do that than go see a massage therapist, and that's his model. He moves to the Cotswolds, sees another chiropractor who tries to talk him out of that, and he's like, well, why? I like what I'm doing. I'm fine with that. I'm not in chronic pain. It's a bit stiff time to time, and I'm happy. And again, these are conversations I'm having 15 years after graduating, and it kind of changes the framework slightly, and all of these little bits just build that puzzle of how you see day-to-day practice. And it would probably be remiss of me to go, Again, that's nonsense. We don't do that. And that's where I might delve into a more, okay, let's trial a little bit of this. And my normal approach with those type of patients is give them something of what they want, because it then opens the door to a wider picture.
Absolutely.
And to sit down for another 20 minutes and have a chat with him, he's going to go somewhere else until he gets it. And it slowly then erodes that clinical picture. Whereas if I give him a bit of what he wants, build that rapport, start unpicking those conversations. How do you think this works? Maybe you can go away now and when you go to the gym, try a bit of this next time, and then we'll see you in 6 weeks and see how you're getting on, and just start building that framework. What happens if we go to 3 months? How do you feel about leaving it a bit longer? Yeah, you go to the gym, call me if you need to, but in the meantime, try these things and see if you feel a bit better in 6 or 8 or 12 weeks time. And I like having those conversations with patients. Yeah.
Who are we to tell the patient that their experience of their body is wrong?
Exactly.
Yeah, and even if we believe there's a better way for that person, we've got to be careful about how we do that. And that's the dance that we're constantly playing. And that's where the expert communication, the experience does come in. You understand that person has a belief system that you have to be careful about. You have to consider whether they're ready to even approach a different way of practice. And that's sometimes the answer is no. and you have to respect that.
Yeah.
That's one big part of the evidence-based practice Venn diagram, right? It's the patient's expectations and beliefs. We have to respect that. And if we disregard it, then they will find someone else, as you've just explained.
Yeah, for sure. And I have patients now who I've used that approach with over many years, and I still see them now. And they very much come round to, I don't want to call it my way of thinking, because that does all the other people doing good work in the service, but what I do on a day-to-day basis. And they come to me with this is what I want, this is what I like. And I'm like, okay. And now what I do is what they like. And it's because they've gone, oh, you do a bit more than just that. And it's, I can do that, but we can add on all these other things on top of it. And they go, oh, that makes a bit more sense. And I say this to students when they have a patient who's come to them. They said, yeah, he sees this chiropractor down the road and he has the 3-minute appointments and yada, yada. And I'm like, brilliant. You just spend an extra 20 minutes with him or her, and they're going to be in awe of what you do, because you do all those other things and you can add all this on. And ultimately, he's probably going to be paying the same price. So the patient's going to leave thinking, oh, I get far more within that consultation than where I was going up the road. So I think use that, harness it, and make it into a positive for what you do.
You're just adding value. Ultimately.
Adding value, yeah, exactly.
Just adding value. And we're drifting now into almost the kind of business side of what you do. You run a clinic. You're a business owner, an entrepreneur alongside your practice. So that value add, do you think that's always been there? Have you always been looking for that as a practitioner?
Yes, but I wouldn't say from a financial model. Like, I don't think it's I see value add as when that patient leaves, can this be the best clinical experience they've ever had? And that's probably the hat that I'll put on. Whether they pay more or less for that's not what I'm about. It's more about when they leave, are they going to tell everyone else that, wow, that chiropractor is really different? I got a really different experience there. That's what I wanted to say. And I love reviews that are like, Rob's not like any chiropractor I've ever seen before. I'm like, brilliant, that's really cool, that's what I want. I've added extra stuff. And if they come in, and sometimes they can be a bit reductionist as well, they also give you a massage and they also do manipulation and they give you some exercises. And obviously it's a bit more than that. But I like that. Yeah, and so I do see the value add as a simple thing to add. It's not, because it's not, I find if you're not doing it, you're actually just taking away. I think that's what should be included as standard when you're seeing a patient, really.
Yeah, I think that is the difference, isn't it, between value and price?
Yeah.
It's like the value is what more can you do? How can you help this person in front of you? And that's where the generalism comes in, right? We're talking about the specialist.
Yeah.
Sometimes the specialist sees things through too narrow of a lens in order to keep adding value for that person. Yeah. So it's where the questions come in as well, because when you're asking those holistic, broad questions, you're trying to figure out what's the thing that's going to move the needle for this person's journey.
Yeah.
Is it going to be encouraging them to exercise? Is it going to be manual therapy? Is it going to be having a conversation about them getting to bed earlier? Right? You're thinking about how you can add value, and if you go into the session thinking about that, then there's a really good chance that you'll find something that connects with that person.
Yeah, I like that hat. I like that framework. Yeah, go into the session thinking of that. Yeah, and then trying to. Is there one thing that you can focus on? And I often have that conversation with the patient of what's the biggest bang for your buck right now? And it might be exactly as you said, going to bed earlier. It might be going for a 15-minute walk every day. sometimes forget those exercises we've done for the next week. All I want you to do, I had this similar conversation with a patient recently who having a bad time at the moment, significant OA knee, just struggling, not a surgical candidate, all these exercises, and she came in quite upset and is this ever going to get better, yada yada, all those type of quite fearful, quite scared. And simply the answer is, what I want you to focus on for the next week is this, and it's forget everything else. There's not worry, it's not too much stress on it. I want you just to go for a short walk, use your stick, use your poles, whatever you're going, and just try and do 10 minutes every day. Forget everything else. And if you do that, just put yourself a big green tick in a diary and see that as a win for the week. And if we're putting all this other stuff on you, it's sometimes too much. So sometimes taking away is adding value for the patient as well.
We're just going to take a quick short ad break. Something we've really enjoyed about using Jane app is Jane's Sidekick. So it's a little help bar that's been incredibly useful in the last few weeks. We had a new member of the admin team join and we had to train her up really quick. It was a last minute situation, and luckily because of Jane's Sidekick, she was able to use the help section throughout her first few weeks, which meant less time me training her up and more time with Jane training her up. So loads of her questions were immediately answered by the Jane Sidekick, which is something I've not seen before. So it made my life easier, made her life easier, made our business run smoother. So yeah, that works really, really well. And without further ado, back to the episode. A goal without a plan is just a wish. I like that. That's a famous quote, isn't it? I like that. So that's what we often do for people, is that we just create this plan for someone or work with them to get this real clear plan, because they leave them feeling comfortable, hopeful. They feel reassured that there's this plan in place now. What I also quite enjoy with someone is really figuring out what it is. Well, not so much a joy here is when someone comes in, we don't always know why they're in, right? There's something that they're fearful of, something they're worried about, something they're suffering with. It's not always the thing that they say, though.
No. Yeah.
So I have back pain. Okay. Well, lots of people have back pain, but they don't come in for treatment. So what is it about the back pain that you're worried about? Is there a worry?
Yeah. Why now?
Why now? Why are you coming in now? Like, what is it that's going on in your life that you can't do at the moment? So that's these extra questions. I remember learning about expectations. Ask someone what their expectations are for the session. Sometimes that might just be a bit of a tick box, though. It's what do you really want to get out of today's session? Because sometimes it's not clear at the start. Some people come in and they lay it out. They're very good storytellers and they can be really clear what they want. But other people aren't so good at it. You often have to ask that. Yeah. What are you really hoping to achieve in today's session?
Yeah, and it's important. Really, those ICE questions, as they're called now, your ideas, concerns, and expectations. And they do better if they're nested in a wider conversation. So if you can build those into a normal conversation, it's better, rather than exactly as you said. What are your ideas from today? And what are your concerns about your knee? And what are your concerns? What are your expectations from me? Yeah. It's quite hard to think of that on the spot. But if you're nesting that into the wider medical history, then exactly as you said, it really helps underpin the why now. Because you've had a patient that comes in who's had back pain for 15 years and they've never seen anyone else about it. But why now? And it's because they've just retired and they want to go traveling, but they don't want to travel because they can't sit down for 9 hours on a plane. So that's what they're worried about. And it's often these worries and fears, or they're getting older, or one of their friends has just passed away and they're concerned about, deteriorating in their older age. And that it's a totally different framework to think about it. And patients will really, I think you get better buy-in if you can understand that, because that then informs the plan going forwards. And patients like to see that actually you want to do park run. That's your goal. You did park run 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Through whatever reason, you haven't done it for the last 5 years. The goal is to get back to park run. And you constantly reference that goal. And this is why we're doing this exercise. This is why we're doing this particular thing, because it's going to help you get back to doing that park run that you're so excited about doing. And they understand the plan and constantly understand why you're referencing back to doing what you're doing. And patients get it and they get the buy-in. And then they're much more likely to adhere to your recommendations if they understand the journey that you're putting them on, really.
Yeah, like I get a lot of second, third opinion people coming in, and when people tell me what they've done, it often sounds very sensible. It often sounds like, oh yeah, I get why they've done that. That makes sense to me. But it doesn't often make sense to the person in front of me. They haven't figured out why have I got this big long list of exercises?
Yeah,
and it's it's what you just said. It's like that it hasn't connected with their why. It hasn't connected with their goals and their ambitions and what they really wanted to get out of that session. They've missed something.
Yeah.
That's ended with them just not really engaging with that process fully.
Understand the why. I think it is a really good phrase. You know, Simon Sinek talks about start with why, but understanding that patient's motivation. You know, because people think about pain, but they don't think about the wider consequences. And I've used this example a few times, but if you think of that deteriorating elderly knee, you know, that quad strength and that quad function quite quickly diminishes, but then the risk of falling goes up. And, you know, if someone is unable to extend their knee with any decent amount of force, you know, if they trip over and that leg can't sustain them if they have a trip and a fall. So getting them to understand that, for example, is a simple win, a simple buy-in, that actually if you can only extend your knee with a 5 kilo resistance, but this one's 25, if you trip and land on that knee, you can see it's not really going to be able to hold your weight very easily. They go, oh, that makes a lot more sense. And they understand why I'm doing that exercises. You know, fear of falling is one of the biggest fears that, you know, elderly people have. And obviously the risks of that and the long-term issues after that, I don't need to explain to you how significant they can be. So it's those type of bits that get the buy-in. They're actually fearful and worried about falling. So getting that buy-in, or getting that why, gets that buy-in, and hopefully it adheres to improves their compliance. And
it amazes me how the human body can trick someone into sensing symmetry when our data and our clinical assessment can identify quite the opposite. So in those situations, what kind of tools do you use in your practice in order to help someone see the differences?
So dynamometry is something I use quite a lot of. I've used dynamometry in various forms for a while, but very much as you do, you kind of understand what needs to happen anyway. So it doesn't necessarily directly change what I would do, but it helps a patient understand the differences, like I've just alluded to, because you see wild differences in left and right that patients have no idea about. They think their knee's a bit sore, or it's a bit stiff, or it gets a bit achy after do gardening. But actually, the strength difference is massive. So that's something I do use quite a lot of. I've recently just got some force plates, which I'm still very new to. So outside of seeing people stand up and down on them and do a couple of squats and a few jumps, I've kind of really roughly had a bit of a play, but that's all I'd say I've used them for really at the moment. But it's interesting to see how that backs up the dynamometry. And you get someone to do a resisted knee extension, resisted knee flexion, and then get them to do a squat or a stand up and down from a chair onto the force plates. You can see how the symmetry is often quite similar in both of those. Again, the patient's like, wow, I didn't realize I was putting so much weight through my good side or whatever it might be. So again, it just helps them to understand the why. And then if they can go away for 6 weeks and work on that, to then show them that it's actually made a difference, again, I think that it builds their confidence. And I think our primary job as clinicians, therapists, whatever you want to call us, is building patients' confidence. And because if we can build someone's confidence to go for a walk, go for a cycle, go on that holiday, that's what improves their life at the end of the day. And your life is the things you do every day, the basic things, walking to the shops. And if people are not doing those things, if people are not getting out of chairs, they're not going to visit their daughter or their son because they can't get in and out of the car, like those things have much wider impact on their health than their knee being a bit sore. So it's that big picture. And if they then get that confidence from seeing those numbers go up on the screen, then fantastic. I might get the same data from getting them to do 10 squats, or can they stand up and down from a chair? You know, how many can they do in 60 seconds? It probably gives you a similar idea of where that patient's function is, but it's harder for that patient to understand. I think sometimes when they can see 4 kilos, now it's 24 kilos, that's a big change.
Yeah, I think that's right. I often know just through listening to the story and a very basic assessment what I'm going to get that person to start with. But it's the numbers that are the behaviour change motivator. Yeah. That person can be really motivated to solve that number difference. Yeah. Whereas intrinsically they haven't quite got that awareness to solve the problem. And I think what it does is it holds them accountable to the change, because once they know they're being retested, there's a bit of pressure. Yeah. But I think more importantly, it holds us accountable to the change. Yeah. Because if that number doesn't change, then either they haven't done their job or we haven't done our job. And it's really motivated me. I love that feeling when they come in for the retest and they've created more symmetry. They've improved their capacity across the board. I love that. That's a real kind of celebrate with them kind of moment. And it then gives me the validation that what we did has worked. And but there's lots of times also where it hasn't changed, and then we have to think, in a minute, why has it not changed here? And those reasons could be complicated. You're not always going to know why. I mean, you have to trust that person's done the work, but did I push them hard enough? Did I give them the right dose of exercises? Did I test it properly? Were there other factors involved here? And it's those questions that keep spurring me on to improve on what I do and give better programs.
And I would always put it on the clinician as well. If a patient hasn't understood what we're doing or they haven't done it, I always would think that's our fault because we haven't explained it in a way that gets that buy-in, or we haven't shown that we've understood what their why is. So when someone isn't doing our recommendations, a lot of, again, I go back to students again, we have similar conversations because it's good seeing that early journey. Oh, the patient hasn't done it, so of course they're not going to get better. And I will always say that, well, that's on us. Like if they haven't done what we're recommending, there's a reason for that. Is it because we haven't factored into our recommendations into their incredibly busy lifestyle? And I remember being a student thinking, God, everyone's got 15 minutes to do some exercise. You've got young kids, I've got young kids, we run a business. There are many days where I don't have 15 minutes to do whatever exercise that I need to do. I'd love more time, but I can see how my back's a bit sore today, but I've got other stuff that's more important. I didn't understand that when I graduated. I didn't understand that as a student. So it's trying to think about, okay, how can we fit this into your lifestyle? Can you do some heel raises every time the kettle boils? Is there something you can do whilst you're playing with your daughter, on the floor? Can you do it together? Can we build that into your lifestyle so that these are just the normal things that we do every day, so we can try and get as many wins as possible throughout the day?
I think this is the difference between empathy and compassion. Yeah. So empathy being that you feel someone's emotions with them.
Yeah.
Compassion is that you can appreciate the empathy, step back from it and act appropriately.
Yeah.
You act upon it. Is that point of awareness of, hang on a minute, I've got a job to do here to help someone in this pain that they're in, and appreciating that their life is just not conducive to this program that I've given them. I need to adapt it. I need to figure out a way in so that they can feel some early success. So kettle exercises, I always like, what's the kettle exercise we can give you? Or is there just one thing you can do in the day? And I really think that can be a good launch pad for people, that they can build some form of routine, some form of success, because often these people haven't done anything for ages, so they don't need to do much to see change. Right? I often like joke about people who don't exercise. It's like, look, you could just look at a weight and you'll get stronger. It's that easy at your stage. So if we could just find the one thing that you can do in the day, you will see some change. It's the next phase that's actually a bit harder, right? And psychologically it's harder at this stage, but physically you don't really have to work hard until the honeymoon period's over and you actually have to work at the change.
Yeah,
so
I agree. And there's a technique I use quite a lot that I found other people quite useful. I don't know where this came from. I didn't make this up, but I get patients to buy a wall calendar, a simple wall calendar, a flip month by month type wall calendar, and I give them a minimum to do and a maximum to do. So every day you're trying to get somewhere between the min and the max, and the minimum might be do 5 up and downs from a chair. The maximum might be you do half an hour walk, you go to a Pilates class, and you do a series of exercises that I've given you. If you do something between the min and the max, you have to put a green tick in it. If you don't do anything, you've got to put a physical red cross in the diary. And then just kind of gamify it. And the patients like that. And if they pick up a red pen to put a red cross in it, they go, I could probably just do those 5 squats. And if you make it easy enough that the minimum is enough, is something, yes, they could probably do a bit more. I often say to a patient, if by the time you've done 5, you'll probably go, I might be able to do a couple more sets of that because I'm stood next to a chair now. I've just done a few. I know I need to clean my teeth, but I'll just do 5 more before I go to bed. And then I can get that streak. Duolingo have harnessed that streak, gamification to perfection. And people are terrified of, losing their 1,000-day streak on Duolingo. And I want to do the same thing with exercise. But it's making the barrier really low so they can try and do something. And on good days, they can do more. And I think that helps with patients who struggle to exercise, who struggle to know what exercise is. I've always found myself quite lucky that I've enjoyed doing exercise. So I don't understand what it's like to walk into a gym and not know what to do, or to feel nervous or apprehensive. So I'm very lucky in that I can do it. I'm lucky that I've never struggled with mental health issues. So I don't know what it's like to not want to get up in the morning, so I'm very fortunate in that. So, but I think having some empathy from other people's standpoints and understanding like the busy parenting helps you understand that you're not going to understand other people's environments, and just trying to be as compassionate as you can in all walks of life and giving them as low barriers to entry, I think is really beneficial.
Yeah, one of the most common ones that I see is people finding the gym too intimidating for them. It's not just women, but it's predominantly women, I would say, that I have that conversation with. And what we have this fantastic opportunity that people come into us with an injury, and it potentially is the most impactful session or journey that they'll go on that year. So we have that opportunity to help change that person's life for the better. And often the reason they haven't gone to the gym is not because they don't know that it's good for them. It's because they haven't figured out how to break down that fear that they have towards it. So, or another, it might even just be another practical standpoint of, I don't know what to do, so I don't want to go. So they either don't know, or they're too scared, or they're embarrassed, or whatever that might be. We have this amazing opportunity to support someone in that journey. So I agree. I don't have that myself because I was involved. I went to the gym very early in life and have carried on, but I can still understand a person's
that
perspective.
Machine looks scary, right?
Yeah. I can still get that's tricky. Just like when we walked into that Pilates room earlier.
Yeah, same thing.
We look at the Reformer Pilates and we go, what on earth do we do with that?
There's lots of springs there.
How do I do that? I wouldn't want to touch that. So I wouldn't use it.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to use it, I would have to be taught. Someone would have to teach me how to do it and have to go through that process with me.
Admit your vulnerability to do it.
Yeah, that's my role with someone. If I think that it's important to them that they do get stronger and they express a desire to do that in a gym, but they're not sure how to do it. I see it as such a great opportunity for me to support that process. So that's the value add.
Yeah,
right?
it is. Yeah.
It's like, yes, we're going to try and sort your short-term problem of pain out, but we're also going to shape this long-term journey of living differently. You're now going to try and integrate this into the gym, into your life, and I just see that as such a wonderful opportunity we have for people.
And we harness that a bit more at the clinic, and we started a program called Age Strong, which is essentially balance and fall / S&C / basic exercise classes for people over 65. It's mostly probably people over 75 that attend. And the vast majority of people of that age group, the gym wasn't on their radar. I've got people in their 90s, and they were, post World War II, people didn't go to the gym unless you were like a professional athlete. Like, it wasn't a done thing. So people walk into the gym in the clinic and they go, oh, I've never been into a gym before. It looks scary. It looks, what does that do? It's a squat rack, weights. And I give them a weight and they go, oh, that looks heavy. And then you can use how heavy is your grandchild type? Or, when you go on holiday, 20 kilos is about your suitcase limit for most airlines. This is 10. So it's about half that. So have you ever thought about how heavy your suitcase is? And a few conversations around that, and then you can make weights a bit less scary. And exactly as you said, I like to think of that as the value add. If that teaches them some basic movements and teaches them how to go to the gym, are they then more likely to sign up for a gym membership? Maybe. I don't know. But I do have patients I know who have then signed up for a gym membership because they can walk in and go, well, I know there's a TRX there, and Rob showed me how to use the TRX to do some squats or get up from a box or whatever it might be. Or, there are some dumbbells and some kettlebells. So I know I can find a corner and I can use a kettlebell to do some deadlifts, or I can, do some squats, whatever it might be. So the value add, I think, is really important. And it goes exactly as you said again, beyond just their current issue. Hopefully it gives them something for the next few decades of their life, depending on how old they are.
So you're running classes, you're seeing patients one-to-one, you're running a business, you've been a podcast host, you're a part of the Physio Matters group. You are wearing many hats, you've mentioned that. How do you wear so many hats and still deliver high performance within those roles?
I think because I'm naturally curious and I get bored easily is probably the reason I wear so many hats. Because if I had to do all of those roles permanently, I'd probably get quite bored quite quickly. So I have to structure my week that I have. Each day has a bias towards one of those roles. So, whether that's teaching at the university, whether it's working with Physio Matters, whether it's interviewing, whether it's clinical, whether it's running the business, I have structured time. I have a very sympathetic wife who does pretty much exactly what I do as well. And that's the way that we found works for us. Monday is our admin day, where we know from, 8:30 in the morning to we pick up the kids that we have our day to do anything. So that might be all of our meetings. It might be the Physio Matters bits. It might be doing an interview, whatever. It might be having meetings with the clinic manager. But we have all of that. We structure those days, and then we protect that time. And I think that's the key, is having that protected time. I get overwhelmed if I don't have the time to do things. School holidays are a prime example, where I might lose my Monday, and that kind of sets me up for the whole week, and I feel like I'm then always on the back foot trying to chase those things. So that's how I try and juggle it where I can, is by having that structure, and then using tools like Asana, I think, is quite a useful one, and many notes on my phone.
What's Asana?
Bits. Asana is a project management tool, which you can set up a project of things that you're working on, lots of to-do lists, lots of dates, lots of reminders in there, and you can open a project when you're working on it, and here are the 30 things that you need to do for that project. But mostly businesses are run through that and WhatsApp and Apple Notes at the moment.
Yeah, I've used Trello. I think
Trello is very similar. It's very similar. Yeah. There's many other similar things, but it does the same thing.
Because we're here on a Saturday morning in Easter weekend, and the two of us have compartmentalized our lives and juggled a few things. We're wearing different hats to our usual Saturday mornings. So I'm curious about that. There's certain people that wouldn't even consider this as an option, and look, I understand that too, by the way. But there's that's why I asked the question. So I'm curious as to what drives that desire to keep wearing all those hats, and it's the curiosity to learn and to keep becoming a better person and practitioner. Sounds like part of it.
I think there's a quote I always like from Richard Branson, who he said, "Say yes and then work out how to do it later." And I've always kind of embraced that philosophy, whether it's being offered to do a speaking job or teaching gig or whatever it might be. We said, "Oh yeah, say yes and work out how to do it later." And I think having Laura as my wife, who's very much on that same journey, she's of the same mindset as me, very much a push. How can we make the things in our lives better, and how can we make our lives stack the deck in our favor? That's always been the mindset. And if we think, okay, is there a longer game plan here? Yes. Is it going to work out in our favor? Okay, let's go with it. And so having that, but if I'm very lucky that I have that support network at home. If I didn't, I can imagine it's a much harder conversation to come out on a Saturday morning on Easter weekend and come and do a podcast first thing. So
yeah, well, this conversation started many years ago. I think we first spoke on the phone many years ago about trying to collaborate on something, and it didn't work out, right? It was like, say yes and figure out what to do later. Here we are, kind of years later, and we figured it out in the end. We then tried again, I think a few months back, and that was when I kind of suggested, let me know if you're doing anything over Easter, because I'll probably be able to make something work.
Yeah.
Is there then an unhealthy part of that? Because I know that at some point in our lives, we do have to say no to certain things because we're in demand. There's people that want our time, and things that demand our time, not least our families and friends. So yeah, what's the other side of that? How do we try and set healthy boundaries around this stuff?
Yeah, well, Ryan Holiday talks about saying no more than you say yes, and it's really being selective of the opportunities. And I think that's where I'm at the point now where I can say no to things that I don't want to do. Whereas I think early in your career, or early in where depending on what your goals are, because some people have no interest in teaching or putting themselves out there or being on a podcast or whatever it might be, and that's fine. People have got to do whatever they want to do. There's no judgment at all, but you have to think of what's the end goal, and is that opportunity going to get you closer towards the end goal? And then if you are close enough towards your end goal, I think that's when you can start saying no. I think there is a certain amount of regret that comes from saying no. I know people that said no to opportunities, and I've said yes to them, and it's been very lucrative for whatever that opportunity might be. But I think there can be an unhealthy thing if you start saying yes to everything, and depending on what you're putting over that opportunity. The way that I've stacked my week means that I can spend a lot of time with the children. So I can pick them up from school and I can take them to nursery and school on other times. Whereas if I was in a 9 to 5 every day and I didn't see them in the mornings, I didn't see them in the evenings, to then say yes to opportunities at the weekend is a lot more challenging. And so I have stacked the deck in my favor to allow me to say yes to more opportunities that I want to say yes to. There's probably an uncertain healthy aspect of being too focused on your goals, probably. I don't think I've approached that. I think I've got the balance quite right at the moment.
How much clinical practice do you still do?
I do 2 days a week. So I do kind of 9 till 3 on a Tuesday and kind of 10 till 5 on a Thursday, something like that. A little bit of flexibility in that, but give or take that.
And what does your caseload look like at the moment? Give us a range of the type of cases that you see.
Yeah. So at the moment, about 50% of my caseload is our age strong clinic. So these are people who come to see us. They all have comorbidities and pain and injuries, but they're primarily not seeing us for that. They're seeing us because they want to get a bit stronger and they want to reduce their risk of falling. And that's just because we launched that a year ago and I happen to be the one driving that forward. So I've got a lot of people that have pushed to me for that. But besides that, it's a broad range of MSK injuries. And so I might have a day of back pain. I might have a day of OA knee. I might have a day of Achilles tendons. I might have all of that in one day. I do a little bit of vestibular, so your kind of BPPV dizziness, a little bit of vestibular rehab in there. But my predominant caseload is seeing patients in a clinical treatment room, which adjoins the gym. I like to spend as much time between those two rooms as I can. So there's some stuff in the treatment room and some stuff in the gym where possible. But I'm very happy to see anything and everything as long as it's within my lane, if you will.
Do you have when something comes in and you think, yes, what's your favourite thing to treat?
OA, knee and hip, predominantly lower limb stuff. I've just recently done Joe Gibson's course and now I want to see all the shoulders because that was a phenomenal course. But no, I've always liked hip and groin pain, knee pain. I like really chronic long-term back pain. So patients who have been, I've seen everyone, I've done everything. I've had back pain for 15 years. I always see someone just to help manage it. I quite like those people who are quite invested in their health and they really want to do something about it. I hate dealing with cervical radiculopathies.
Mm-hmm.
There's some way those really horrible cervical radicular pain. Like if I never saw one of those again, I always seem to make them worse. And I always say and my clinic kind of managers and front desk know that as well, that my wife will see all of those and a lot of the other chiropractors will love seeing those. Whereas I'm like, actually, no, if I didn't see one of those again, then I'd be happy.
15-year chronic lower back pain comes into your room.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start that journey?
Oh, great question. Well, it depends on, I think the first part is really understanding what their beliefs are around the problem. So do they believe it's because someone's told them they've had a leg length discrepancy 15 years ago? Or are they very well versed in pain science and they've done some good courses and they've seen some excellent practitioners to help them understand it? So understanding where they're at, I think, is the most important. Understanding what they think they need from me, I think, is one, because it might be because I need to get my leg length realigned, or it might be because I need someone just to help guide me on the path and to give me some new exercises and test my strength or whatever it might be. So it depends on where they're coming from, I think, is paramount. And then it's building rapport. So it's whether you are joking around with the patient, whether you're mirroring their body language, all of those things just to help build that rapport quite early doors and showing them that you understand where they're coming from. You obviously have the clinical testing and you have all these other things which kind of go without saying, but I think when that patient leaves, they need to understand that you understand where they're coming from, you understand what they need, and you have a plan in place for them. And then you also have a plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E. Because I like to explain that to patients. So this is the direction that I'd like to go. Please go away and think about that. We can have a discussion on the phone, on email, whatever you want to do. But I also have these backup plans. If you come into me in 8 weeks' time and you're getting worse, then we're going to change the plan. Like this isn't stuck in place. I like to explain to patients that journeys aren't linear. They very much have good days and bad days, and that's a very normal thing. It's not if they come to see me in a few weeks' time and they've had a really bad day. That's okay. Pain is information. It's not necessarily pathological. So it's helping them understand a few of those key kind of parts of pain science to take away from. And when they leave, I want them to feel positive. I want them to feel that, okay, I might have some stuff going on that I need to address, but I haven't come in with back pain and I've left with 17 different problems. I've left feeling pretty positive about my diagnosis, if you can call it that, or whatever we prescribe for that patient.
I love that you haven't given me a specific treatment. You've just described a few of the things that you might discuss with someone, a few of the common themes that run through those sessions, because in those cases, who the hell knows what you're going to do, right? I see a lot of that stuff too, and I love working with it. And I guess it was almost a bit of a trick question because there isn't such a thing as what do you do? It's like what are the types of things that you might do, right? That's really what you've ended up describing there. And I'm reading a book at the moment called The Painful Truth, I think it's called. It's quite an interesting pain book, and a lot of the stuff in it, I'm like, oh yeah, I knew that, but it's got some really nice extra metaphors, extra ways of understanding things within
yeah.
it. And there's a quote from Bessel van der Kolk, who's the guy who, I can't remember the book that he wrote, it's a trauma book. I think it's The Body Keeps the Score. Something like
yes,
that.
yeah.
And I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of, how can someone expect to heal physically, psychologically, emotionally when their body is stuck in fear? You know, what you've just described is a way of creating safety.
Yes.
You've just described a way of helping someone feel safe within your practice, someone safe within that session, reassured that it's safe to start, and that allows the healing journey.
Yeah.
And the rest of it, all the technicalities that come after that, come from that point of safety. They come from that base of, I'm in safe hands.
Yes.
I can move forwards from here.
Yeah.
That's what rapport is. That's what expert communication is. That's what explaining the plan is. That's what explaining the backup plan is.
Yeah.
That's what explaining the non-linear journey is.
Yeah.
Someone feeling safe and secure and ready to progress.
Yeah, and understanding what's coming down, what's coming towards them. And time, you can think of progressing forwards, or you can think of things coming towards you. I like to think of it as time moves towards you and things happen, and there's going to be hurdles in the way. But often that's not explained, and I think that's a fairly standard thing that should be explained in every consultation, is that it's not linear. You know as well as I do, how many people having back pain get better every single day until they're gone? Very few of them. I'm sure some people might do, in very an acute tweak that gets better in 4 or 5 days, but vast majority don't. And it's helping ride that journey and giving them the tools to help manage it. And if I say this to patients all the time, is I don't want to see, if I'm still seeing you in 2 years' time, I might be for whatever reason, but that's not necessarily a win for me. I want you to wake up, it sounds really bad when I say this to patients sometimes, but I want you to wake up one day on a bad day and go, my first thought is not that I need to call Rob. My first thought is, Rob's given me all these things to do. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go for a swim. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do some meditation, whatever it might be. And then if I'm not responding or I need to talk it through, I can give Rob a call and I can talk to him on the phone. He can WhatsApp me. I can email him, whatever it might be, Instagram us, and I can point you in the right direction. Maybe you can come in and see me if you need to as well. But I want to build your resilience so then you have the tools to help manage it and build those structures around you so you can cope, rather than being fearful and relying on me to kind of fix you. And that's that traditional bio part of it, is that we're stuck in that fix me mentality. I think we need to move away, and I like to think that most people have moved away from that. You go to see the physio, chiro, osteo to get fixed. Hopefully the chiro, physio, osteo is giving you the tools to help manage it yourself. And that can be surprising to patients sometimes. It can be surprising when students come and observe me and I might not do any treatment to that particular patient on the day, but actually I've been treating them by talking to them for an hour and unpacking their beliefs and helping them, giving them those tools and those frameworks to help build their resilience and their management for their own problems. And I think that's probably, it is the most powerful thing that we can give a patient.
Pain is information. I want to come back to that because that might get lost. That's a really key part to helping someone understand how to self-manage. You just described self-management there and how powerful that can be for someone, not fixing, but helping them fix themselves, giving them the tools. It's easy for us to say though, right? That's what I often say. It's like, oh yeah, easy for me to say, by the way. Like, I understand that you're the one suffering, but that's my role to be able to, this compassion again, to step back and understand this for what it really is. And that pain that you're feeling, that flare up, is information. I've often said to someone that, you know the people who have flare-ups, they're not constantly in pain, but they have these flare-ups that last for a few days to a few weeks, and that's laced through their life for many years. When they come in and they're not in pain, I'm almost saying to them, look, I'm looking forward to when you have a flare-up, because that's when we will understand this more deeply. That's our chance to really figure out what's going on here and what we're going to do together to fix this problem. And they look at you a little bit quizzically, but but once you can help them understand that pain is information, that's where they suddenly see it from a different light. Because up until that point, often they've been trying to figure out what's the structure that's damaged that is creating this pain. But if that pain waxes and wanes and goes away in 2 or 3 days, then there is no structure that I'm aware of that heals in 2 or 3 days like that. You can't have pain to the severity they have it and then be better 2 or 3 days later, and for that to logically be a structure that's been damaged and then healed. So once they get that and grasp it,
that's a huge moment for them.
Yeah.
Then you can help shape their management in the future of, sure, when you have a flare up, you might take it easy for a day or two, but don't let it derail the rest of the month.
Yeah.
You might have this symptom for 2 weeks, but as soon as you've let the worst of it settle, get back on the horse.
Yeah.
Because we've now understood, because pain is information, that it's not structural, it's something else. There's your protective system isn't doing its job the way it thinks it is.
Yeah.
It's overprotecting.
Yeah.
And now it's your role to reprogram that system.
I use that analogy I use a lot with athletes is most people have been in pain in the gym. You go to the gym tomorrow. If you sit on an erg and do a 2,000 meter row, it's horrifically uncomfortable. You're in a lot of pain. Your shoulders ache, your back aches, your quads ache, your CV systems are going crazy. I said, if you woke up tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the morning feeling like that, you would call an ambulance because you feel horrific. Now, obviously, there's an explanation for the reason you're doing it on an erg, but the pain that you're feeling is arguably the same, but the reaction to it is very different. And it's because when you understand the situation, you understand that it's not necessarily a threat. So you feel the discomfort, but you can tolerate it, you can manage it. You know there's going to be an endpoint when you get off that rower. But the feeling that you have is the same. Pain is pain. It's just information, and it's the concept that it's in, or the context that it's in, and it's in how we manage it that's important. And that hopefully in some patients builds that understanding of actually it's kind of the same feeling, and just getting them to understand that it's not always pathological, it's just information.
Yeah, and often it's perhaps started as pathological, but it's carried on as something different. And certainly back pain, society is to blame often for this.
Sure.
Society is terrified of back pain.
Yeah.
And as a result, it shapes a lot of people's beliefs about what that means. So a back injury that they've had 15 years ago is something that they need to now be very, very careful about because they did it lifting, therefore they now no longer lift heavy. But then it's the same as saying to someone, well, you injured your hamstring running, don't ever run again.
Yeah.
And no one would ever advise that. And no one would ever think that that's logical.
Yeah.
But yet we do that with back pain, and we sometimes do that with other big injuries because there's an emotional context to it. Often a hamstring strain running, it's not that emotional. It's like that's annoying. I'll have to rest and then get back to it later, and then I get back to it. But when there's emotional meaning to that injury, it drives fear, it drives anxiety around it. It then changes behaviour. Yeah. So you can see how it can happen, but it's helping someone understand that isn't the logical, that isn't the actual change that's going on in your body. This is why it's safe. This is the thing we're working on.
And I think back pain is arguably worse as well. I would say that your acute back and neck pain, those patients are in more pain than your acute knee, or, I'm being very generalist here, but the vast majority of them probably are. And they're probably more scared. Why that is, I don't know. Maybe you can't see your back. You can't see, there's a lot of societal expectations around back pain. You have it for life. And, my dad have back pain, so I'm going to have back pain. And it's this kind of, these threads that have filtered through society that where they came from, I don't know. But we've all seen it. We've all seen it in patients who, I use this example a lot of a lady I saw who was mid-70s. She was a dancer, age 16, 17. She had some back pain. And she saw some form of clinician, who it was, I don't know, 60 years ago or something. And she said, your back is the worst back I've ever seen for a 17-year-old girl. I don't want you to lift anything heavier than a shopping bag. And she's done that for 50, 60 years. She's never lifted anything. Her daughters got to a certain age, she didn't pick them up because she thought, my back's bad, so I can't do that. She didn't actually have a lot of pain. She had a huge amount of stiffness because she was terrified of moving. And she sat down in a, that kind of military posture, didn't want to bend at all. I probably can't, unpack 50 years of beliefs. It's going to take years to get back to that. And it might just be helping. She might walk out thinking, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. A doctor told me this 50 years ago not to move. And every time I move, it hurts. So obviously he's wrong. So it's very hard to unpack those beliefs. And I don't think you ever will in some cases, but it's important to start somewhere.
I often think of it in my mind, and sometimes I'll talk this through with people. It's like they're kicking the can down the road with that choice not to lift. Right?
Yeah.
You choose not to lift in the short term, and that's fine. It probably does lead to less chance of flare-up, less chance of re-injury.
Yeah.
In the medium term, they get a little bit weaker and a little bit less able to do the things they want to do. But again, they're not really noticing any genuine change in their life.
Yeah.
So they're kicking the can down the road that in the long term, as in your example, 60 years later, they can't bend, they can't
lift. They're so weak that they rely on other people to do everything for them. It's good to catch people early there, because the beliefs aren't quite so set in. The changes haven't quite solidified into permanence. So it's an opportunity to help people see that.
Choose your hard, right? So you can be hard now, it can be hard later. Choose which hard which one you want to take.
Yeah, and I really love what you were saying about safety. You are just creating safety in that clinic environment to have those honest conversations and to help people feel like it's worth it. It's worth taking the risk that they perceive in order to get the results that they want, because that's the bit you have to connect the story to their fears.
Yeah.
I know you're fearful of this, but I also know that you want this, and I can help you bridge that gap and get to where you want to be.
Yeah.
So in the end, us generalists, that's what we're good at, is listening, communicating, and helping people bridge the gap between their long-term complicated problems and where they want to be.
Yeah, and there's a reason we teach people to deadlift. It's not because we want them to be deadlifters, it's because we want them to be able to pick up stuff without fear. And if I can teach you that actually lifting up that kettlebell, which might be 20 kilos, it's one of my favorite things to see is when I have an 87-year-old lady on a hex bar picking up weight that she, and they always say, I can't wait to tell my daughter about this. Can you take a photo of my phone or something? And I love that, because that's amazing to see. And once they understand that actually picking stuff up is important, they often want to. And a 90-year-old lady said to me last week or a couple of weeks ago, she said, you get to a certain age and people do stuff for you and you don't remember what it's like to use your muscles. So she said, and she loves lifting weight of any kind, anything where she's doing a row on a TRX or doing a farmer's carry with a weight up and down the room. She loves the feeling of holding weight. And she said, you forget what that's like. And it really hit home for me that actually people do things for you. You ask for help, people, I'll carry that to the car for you. And that's quite a normal thing. And we think we're being, kind and chivalrous to when we do that to a 80-year-old lady crossing the street. But actually she needs to move and she needs to pick things up, or he needs to carry some weight. So I forgot that people forget what it's like to use your muscles. So good thing to consider.
It's a powerful thing. And this is the value add, right? This is the extra.
Yeah.
This is the going the extra mile and thinking about what's actually going to make this person better.
Yeah.
Not just let's massage and manipulate their back so that the lady can feel a little bit less stiffness and tightness for a few minutes to a few hours to a few days, perhaps. It's genuinely trying to change that person's life at any opportunity.
Yeah, and it's giving them the tools to manage it themselves where possible.
And what have we not spoken about today that's important? What else would you like to cover before we wrap up for the episode?
Oh, I don't know. I think we've gone pretty deep in most of those topics. That covered back pain. We can go down the business route if you want to, and talk about chiros and physios in MSK and osteopaths and how they fit together, which is another thing that often gets queried.
Yeah, you work in an MDT, you work alongside those practitioners yourself, and it makes sense. That's the way you think, so that's the way you've designed your business. So how do you think that the future should be for those professions? Yeah,
so we're quite unique in the way that we work, where if you ring up my clinic and you say, I've got a sore knee, we will say, we've got an appointment to see Sarah, Josh, Asti, whoever. We don't necessarily say we've got a physio tomorrow or a chiro on Thursday or an osteopath on Saturday. Very much as who do we think is the best person for you rather than the best profession for you. So we've angled it in that way. I like to think that that's where it is going. I think that people within my business have their areas that they like to see more of. Like I said, I hate seeing cervical radiculopathy. Many of the team love seeing it, and they're happy to see all of those, but that's not necessarily profession dependent. So I like to see it as that, and I like to think that we can have an MSK profession where competency is first, and people cross-professional can see anyone, and they can be those specialist generalists, and we can sit down and have conversations like this, where, if you hadn't introduced me as a chiropractor, or I didn't know you were a physio, we could have been either. You could be an osteopath, and I think that's the way I like to see it. The way I like to see it going. HSU, where I work in at the moment, down in Bournemouth, and campus in London, is chiro, physio, osteo, podiatry, diagnostic imaging, all in one house. So there are places, universities now, which are having these conversations, and the clinic model that we have, I like to think can be extrapolated. there is a lot of professional identity, and some people do want to hang on to that for many different reasons. A lot of people have fought very hard for professional identity, so they don't want to get rid of it. And I get that standpoint too, but it's not something that I've really been hugely protective of. And I'm very much of, well, who's the best person for you? And I know that now when I've got colleagues and family members looking for someone to help them with their ankle in Durham, I'll look for who the best person to help them with their ankle is. I won't search for Durham chiropractors or Durham physiotherapists. I'll find someone who I think is going to be the best person for them. And I like to think that is the viewpoint that we move towards. Same thing from the internal referrals, from whether that's surgeons or GPs. They're looking at who is the best person. I like to think that our clinic now has a very good reputation, where our local orthopods, our local GPs are saying, Dyer Street will help you, rather than the physio can help you. And that's the route that I want to try and develop.
I think this is where we have social media to thank, is that we are more similar than we are different, because everyone has access to the same information. And although that's always been true, it's just that much easier to get the access. So we may be taught in a certain way through our degree courses.
Yeah.
But once we then graduate, we get out into the real world, it's up to us. And you mentioned about your journey of you just happened to find these courses that were run by physios, and it was interesting to you.
Yeah.
So that's how that shaped your early years, and it shaped who you are now. But yeah, we're more similar than we are different. And as a result, we are able to just treat MSK as a problem rather than as a profession.
Yeah.
And I really love what you're describing there. Mm-hmm. It's who's the best person for the job, not what's the best profession for the job.
Yeah, and hopefully that's the way it can move forward. Fingers crossed. We will see in the years to come, I guess. But I think it's changed a lot even in the last 10, 15 years since I graduated. I think there's more opportunities for chiropractors. There's more sports teams taking on chiropractors. They've always been there to some degree, but I think exactly as you said, with the rise of social media, with people going to the forefront, having conversations like this, maybe there's a physio out there listening to this who's gone, oh yeah, there's some chiropractors down the road from me, but they don't know what they're talking about, can go, well, actually, there's other people out there who maybe we are more aligned than we're different, which hopefully we can, through mediums like this, bring to the forefront of their mind.
Yeah, I think it's great. Well, thanks very much for coming on today. We're going to finish with our traditional question, even though I kind of answered it for you in the opening paragraph. But what does better never ends mean to you?
I think it's constantly being curious, that I alluded to, and it's always asking why. It's the quote which you started with at the beginning of, why do we do something? Can it be done differently? And that is what better never ends means. Constantly striving to be the best that you possibly can be, knowing when to stay in your lane, knowing when to say no, and knowing when to recognize that you need to get better in certain areas. And that's okay to do. That's a good thing. No one thinks they know everything. It's a very dangerous place to be. So it's recognizing where you need to improve, and then having the tools and resources to go after that.
And how does someone find out about you, Rob?
I'm fairly quiet on social media, just for many reasons. LinkedIn's probably the best place at the moment. So just search my name, Rob Beaven, on LinkedIn. I do have a couple of social media, Instagram and Twitter pages, but they're fairly quiet at the moment. But yeah, Rob Beaven across all platforms.
And there's 125, did you say 125 podcasts that are in the back catalogue if someone wants to learn about
yes.
you and the things that you like talking about?
Yeah, the back pain podcast was launched in COVID, did 125 episodes, just shy of 1 million downloads across all platforms. It's a patient-facing podcast about back pain. So yeah, various experts talking about their particular subject.
Yeah, and your clinic, Cirencester, I think you said Dyer Street Clinic.
Yeah, the Dyer Street Clinic's in the capital of the Cotswolds, which is Cirencester. So we have 2-site clinics down there. We have 27 staff members across chiros, physios, osteopaths, GPs, consultants, you name it. So we have a wide range of a big MDT, which is a very good learning space.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming in, and I'll let you get back to your Easter weekend.
Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you've made it this far, that probably means you've enjoyed the show. Please leave us a review and subscribe to the show on whichever platform you use. I've been told that this stuff really does help us to reach more people like you. And if you are someone in charge of things at work, book a demo call with Jane to see it for yourself. Use code Physio Coach 2MO to get 2 months free. To stay up to date, follow us on Instagram at Better Never Ends or on YouTube, the Physio Coach Podcast. This podcast is a product of Better Physio Group, provider of physio and PT services in central London, helping people in pain, suffering with injury to feel better and live better. There's physio, and then there's Better Physio.